Gilles Marmasse is a professor at the University of Poitiers. He has written on Hegel extensively, most recently Le négatif au travail, Hegel et la raison en devenir. And he's going to speak on Hegel on substance. Please.
Probably all the important things on the couple Spinoza, Hegel, and the couple substance subject was already said, and very well said, on how not to repeat. So I will only add a few silly and undefensible assumptions. So it will be my task this morning. So I would say that in introduction that the notion of substance, so often used in Hegelian discourse, does not actually make a really good impression. In its opposition to subjectivity, it appears as a moment of contradiction, that of the unresolved conflict between unconditionality and relativity. However, the situation in no way diminishes the richness and interest of the concept of substance, which is a necessary step on the road to reconciliation. Here, moreover, it is partly through the notion of substance that Hegel comments on his relationship to the metaphysical tradition, especially to Spinoza, and specifies in what sense he intends both to preserve and to go beyond Spinozism. One of the features of Hegelianism, as we know, is that it does not simply expel the concepts it criticizes. Its relationship to substance is neither simply hostile nor simply condescending. Rather, Hegel seeks the originality of his own thought, and in particular of the concept of subjectivity, by situating it in relation to the inescapable otherness of substance. The question, in my view, is, on the one hand, what kind of reality substance denotes, and in particular, how it differs in Hegel from related terms such as thing, phenomenon, or cause, etc., and on the other hand, what specific complaints Hegel has about it. My hypothesis, very simple, will be as follows. Substance denotes a moment of objectivity. It corresponds to that which possesses a constituted identity and has a power over its environment. At the same time, however, since it is not determined by an internal goal, it is not free, so that its relation to the otherness is inadequate. My talk will focus on three main questions. First, in the most general terms, what distinguishes substance from immediacy and subjectivity? Secondly, what does substance mean in the internal economy of the doctrine of essence? Thirdly, and necessary very quickly, what is Hegel's position or originality in relation to his predecessors? So, first part of my talk, substance versus immediacy and subjectivity. I would say that the meaning of substance in Hegel's writings is multifaceted, depending on the place and systematical context in which the term appears. This is not a specific situation, since in Hegel, the terms that structure systematic discourse must be understood in each of their uses from the point of view of the moment to which they belong. Substance, then, can be understood more or less broadly. In the least specific sense, it is synonymous with true reality in general. Then, in a more precise sense, I would say that it denotes objective and relative reality, as opposed, on the one hand, to immediacy, and on the other hand, to subjectivity. And that is because in the science of logic, substantiality comes under the doctrine of essence and not under the doctrine of being or the doctrine of concept. Finally, if we narrow the field of observation even further within actuality, Wirklichkeit, as the third section of the Doctrine of Essence, the relation of substantiality is opposed to the relation of causality and the relation of reciprocal action. And so in the first part of my paper, I propose to consider the first two uses of the term. First, so in order to consider a first use, substance as true reality, let us read a well-known quotation from the autograph introduction to the lessons on the philosophy of history. You have normally a handout. I read, by the speculative knowledge is proved that reason is the substance as the infinite power, itself the infinite stuff of all natural and spiritual life, as the infinite form, the activity of this its content. It is the substance, namely that, by which and in which all reality has its being and existence. So there's no need to go into a detailed exegesis of this statement. But what is interesting for my purpose is that here the notion of substance is taken as equivalent to true reality, the reality that philosophy as such, if we follow, for example, Plato and Aristotle, sets out to identify and bring to light. Substance here is what gives actual reality its being and subsistence, in short, its objectivity. It is what makes the real not an appearance of reality, not something either superficial or merely constructed by the observer. And secondly, so in order to consider a second use, substance as finite objectivity, let's turn to one of the best-known quotations about the concept of substance found at the beginning of the preface to the Phenomenology. The interest of this quotation lies in the extremely general nature of its use of the term, which here is not related, in my view, to any particular moment of the system of science. I read, according, that's very, very null, of course, according to my insight, which only has to be justified by the presentation of the system itself, everything depends on understanding and expressing the true not as substance, but just as much as subject. The living substance is furthermore the being, which is real in truth only insofar as it is the movement of putting oneself together or the mediation of becoming different with oneself, not an original unity as such or immediate as such, is the true. So these formulations are very difficult to understand, but I would say that this passage presents three concepts that, in a certain sense, negate each other. At the first extreme, immediacy, which can be understood, in my view, as what is unexplained and unfounded. At the other extreme, subjectivity, which can be understood, in my view, as that which is self-determining and self-legitimating, that which has a free relationship with itself and otherness. And finally, substance, which is posited as the second moment of the cycle and which we must define. So what then does this median position of substance imply for Hegel? Let us consider a quote from the Nuremberg period, quotation 3, active substance as originary being turns against the contingent as other and is the cause that operates on the other. So a very simple formulation, but which must be explored. Here we see that substance refers to otherness, and more precisely to accidentality. Here, the contingent as other in the quote. This does not necessarily mean that otherness is really external to substance. Accidentality can be an internal aspect of substance. But in this conception we see emerging, substance is not completely unified. Moreover, substance exerts an action on otherness. It is an operative cause. Substance is thus power. But the otherness to which substance refers is not free. According to the quote, it is contingent. In a word, it is reduced to a simple instrument of substance. Between substance and its accidentality, I would say there is no relationship of integration and recognition. Substance does not relate to otherness as to itself, and this is the abstraction of the substance. Finally, we saw in this first part of my talk two meanings of the substance. First, the substance as true reality in general, and secondly, the substance as a finite reality which differs from simple immediacy as well as from subjectivity, in the sense that it has a power, it has a relation to otherness, but to an other which is not itself. And so now I go to the second part of my talk, substance in the doctrine of essence. And this is the part which will be the most long of my talk. So I now would propose to highlight the originality of substance in the precise sense that it acquires as a moment in the doctrine of essence. As we know, substance or substantiality is more specifically included in actuality, Wirklichkeit. But in it, it is only one moment among others. In my view, this means that substance as a logical category expresses the general features of actuality, once again in the sense of the doctrine of essence, but also specifies it. This gives rise to at least two tasks for the commentator. First, to identify the global determinations of Wirklichkeit, and in particular, what distinguishes it from the other great moments of the doctrine of essence. Thus, if we follow the plan of the logic of encyclopedia to understand the opposition of Wirklichkeit to essence as ground of existence and to appearance. Secondly, to understand what, in the context of Wirklichkeit, substance opposes to the other internal specifications of Wirklichkeit. In the logic of encyclopedia, Hegel, as we know, contrasts the relationship of substantiality with the relationship of causality and the relationship of reciprocal action. It is this distinction that we must grasp. Given the extraordinary richness and complexity of Hegel's text, my analysis can only be rudimentary. So I will make some choices and something global interpretation. My aim is to identify the main distinctions that give a positive and precise meaning and determinate meaning to the relation of substantiality. So let's begin by grasping the general characteristics of Wirklichkeit, and thus what contrasts it with the first two spheres of the doctrine of essence. As an epinome of essence as ground of existence, I will consider its final moment, the thing. Let's examine the concept of thing as it appears in the encyclopedic logic. In my view, there is namely much to be learned from considering the distinction between thing and substance. In the systematic development of the text, as we know, the thing is successively defined as a carrier of properties, as a compound of matters, and finally as matter endowed with form. But what is the problem with the thing? What is its deficiency in the economy of Doctrine of Essence? I would say that in all three cases, the Science of Logic text examines the thing as an isolated entity. This is the point. It is namely not a thing in relation to its environment, to anything other than itself. On the contrary, I would say, the thing as such focuses on itself, i.e., on its properties, materials, and forms. So, while it gives an account of its determinations in the sense that it presents an essence that is expressed in them, it is indifferent to the exterior, not influenced by it, but also unable of acting over the exterior. In this sense, from the point of view of the overall economy of the Doctrine of Essence, the thing as such is abstractly immediate. Let's now consider the second part of the Doctrine of Essence, the phenomenon or appearance, in German, die Erscheinung. What we need to understand here is not just the phenomenon itself, but the relationship between the in itself and the phenomenon. A useful formulation for understanding this relationship, I would say, is found in an edition of the Encyclopedia, quote 8, "The hereby said apparition does not stand on its own feet and has its being not in itself but in another." So, in the previous moment, we were dealing with the mediation of the thing by itself, which accounting for its inner determinations. From now on, the mediating relationship associates a mediating term with a multiplicity of mediated terms that are external to it. The mediating term, the in itself, opens itself up to the real multiplicity, exerts its power of determination over this multiplicity, and is in turn influenced by it. Unfortunately, in the sphere of appearance, the mediating principle alone is not sufficient to account for what is mediated. It is not a sufficient cause. So the intervention of something other and or favorable circumstances are required for it to act. An extra logical example given by Hegel in an edition is that of a magnetic force exerting effects on iron, but this precisely insofar as it is solicited by it. Finally, let's turn to the third and final moment of the Doctrine of Essence, Wirklichkeit. In what way does Wirklichkeit escape from the inadequacies encountered in the thing and in the appearance? And what is the specificity of substance or substantiality within Wirklichkeit in general? Regarding the first point, the general features of Wirklichkeit, I would say that reality is wirklich when the mediating term, in Hegel's vocabulary, the Sache, is not just a mediation on its own behalf, but also for the objectivity in the sense of the plurality of external things. What's more, the Sache acts by itself. It does not need an external solicitation or favorable conditions, and thus reveals itself fully in its activity. So it is the way I read paragraph 100 42, which is extremely important and, of course, very difficult to interpret. Actuality, Wirklichkeit, is the unity of essence and existence, or of what is inner and what is outer, the utterance of the actual itself, so that the actual remains still something essential in this utterance, manifestation, manifestation would be better perhaps, and is only something essential so far as it is in immediate external existence. The Wirkliche does not remain confined within itself, but externalizes itself. It objectifies itself by producing itself as an external existence that acts on its environment. This is, it seems to me, the difference between the thing and the Wirkliche. Moreover, unlike appearance, the mediating term, die Sache in Wirklichkeit, acts spontaneously and efficiently on its environment. The science of logic in the section on Wirklichkeit gives the example of light. I read quotation 10, the light of nature is neither something nor a thing, for its being is only its appearing, so manifestation is absolute actuality equal to itself. In other words, I comment, light unfolds of its own accord, irresistibly eliminating its external environment, and is therefore neither an abstract thing nor an abstract appearance. What more precise analysis of Wirklichkeit does Hegel propose? Consider paragraphs 147, 149 of the Encyclopedia, which provide a rich analysis of the processes of Wirklichkeit as the relation of the Sache, as the thing in question, its conditions, and its activity. And surprisingly, Hegel insists on the dissociation of the moment of effectivity. While paragraph 142 has something almost triumphant, emphasizing the superiority of Wirklichkeit over earlier moments in the Doctrine of Essence, paragraphs 147, 149 instead show that the moment of Wirklichkeit remain split. Quotation 11, the matter, Sache, is the whole in simple determinacy. But since the whole is external to itself in its form, it is also inwardly and in its content external to itself. And this externality belonging to the matter, Sache, is the restriction of its content. So I would say that the power, but also the deficiency of Wirklichkeit is in fact expressed by the notion of necessity, in what distinguishes from freedom. Of course, what is necessary, according to Hegel, is internally mediated and therefore non-contingent. But necessity refers to dispersed and contingent circumstances, whereas free goal-directed activity of subjectivity takes place whatever the circumstances. Necessary activity produces different results depending on the circumstances. And paragraph 147 emphasizes the finitude of necessity. Quotation 12, the concept of necessity is very difficult, precisely because it is the concept itself, but as inwardly broken forms and in passage. What is wirklich as a definite identity in itself, but also defines itself in opposition to what it is not, namely its condition. It is thus characterized by the contradiction, I would say, of identity and non-identity. Moreover, it acts spontaneously and effectively, but need nevertheless a condition to act. It is thus characterized by the contradiction of independence and dependence. Thirdly, while what is wirklich manifests itself in its activity, it is the condition that immediately appears. It is as Wirklichkeit is thus characterized by the contradiction of the manifestation of self and the manifestation of another. Finally, the finitude of the process of Wirklichkeit lies in the fact that the Sache does not maintain a relationship of identification, but on the contrary, of opposition with otherness. So let us now turn to the second task of my second part. The second task, understanding what in the economy of Wirklichkeit distinguishes the relationship of substantiality from the relationship of causality and the relationship of reciprocal action. This is where the question arises as to what connection can be found between the analysis of substantiality in the Doctrine of Essence and the Spinozist conception of substance, or rather, with Hegel's understanding of the Spinozist conception of substance. If we read the Doctrine of Essence in the logic of 1813, it is the moment, as we said yesterday, the moment of the it is the moment of the absolute, i.e., before the relationship of substantiality that is accompanied by remarks on Spinoza. It could therefore be argued that it is the absolute and not the relationship of substantiality that refers to Spinozism. It could, moreover, be argued that Hegel's relation of substantiality should be interpreted primarily in relation to the category of substantiality as it appears, along with the categories of causality and reciprocal action in the transcendental analytic of the Critique of Pure Reason. We must also add that in Hegel's analysis, substance is related to its accidents and not to its modes, which does not correspond to Spinoza's vocabulary. To this, however, it will be objected that paragraph 151 in the moment of the relation of substantiality in the encyclopedia is accompanied in Leopold von Henning's edition of the Philosophy of Spirit by an addition that deals with Spinoza, and that von Henning's choice seems legitimized by the fact that in the critical editions of the lessons on logic by Meiner, Udo Ramal and Hans Christian Lucas, we do indeed read developments on Spinoza in connection with paragraph 151, or in connection with its equivalent in the 1817 edition of the Encyclopedia, paragraph 98. In the final analysis, then, it seems to me legitimate to consider that Hegel conceived, at least partly, the relation of substantiality as linked to the Spinozist conception of substance. Let's now return to reading the specificities of the relation of substantiality. If we compare it with the relation of causality and the relation of reciprocal action. In the first place, we can say that substance as such is indeterminate. A cause, from a Hegelian point of view, has a determinate and exclusive nature. Rain is moistening but not coloring. For example, a pigment is coloring but not moistening, etc. In contrast, substantiality in itself is not determined. It has no distinctive content. Hegel refers to it as indeterminate equality with itself. Secondly, substantiality is not produced as such. This is what distinguishes the relation of substantiality from the relation of reciprocal action. Substantiality, in a sense, is always already there. It is not a result, but a pure point of departure. This is, in my view, one of the sources of Hegel's criticisms of Spinozism, namely that ethics treats substance as an absolute which is immediate and presented in an accepted definition, i.e., not in a founded proposition. 5 minutes?
10 maximum.
Okay. Really? Okay, I'm sorry. So, okay, so I will go to the end of the second part, and I will perhaps sacrifice the third part. I'm sorry. I tried to okay. So the fact that substance is a starting point and not a result can be associated with another of Hegel's criticisms of Spinozism, namely that ethics present an absolute which as substance is characterized by fixity, Starrheit. Thirdly, the otherness to which substance relates, namely accidentality, although external, is superficial. It has only a phenomenal reality and is incapable of resisting the action of substance, nor do accidents have a power over each other. Hegel reads this point also in Spinoza's doctrine. Finally, substance acts on accidentality in the mode of power, exerting an alternative, creative, and destructive effect. So, quotation 17, it is an addition. The substance manifests itself through the actuality with its content, into which it translates the possible as creating, through the possibility, into which it returns the actual as destroying power. So, and here we can make a link with Spinozism. The analysis of substance as a moment of Wirklichkeit in the Doctrine of Essence combines, I would say, the theme of Spinoza's God, whose power is his very essence, with the theme of the God of the Hebrew religion, who creates the world, and in the episode of the flood shows himself capable of destroying it. And we had yesterday an episode of flood. Substantiality expresses itself in the accidents to the point of removing all autonomy from them. It has a relationship of power, but I would say ultimately a relation of violence to accidents, whereas causality and reciprocal action produce determinate effects, substance deprives accidents of consistency. Moreover, the analysis of substance is marked not only by, let's say, Spinozist and biblical themes, but also by Oriental ones. This is not incoherent if we remember that for Hegel, Judaism belongs to the Oriental world. As it's well known, the lessons on the philosophy of history begin with the Eastern spirit, which is both rigid and in which all finitude vanishes. The Oriental spirit is a quotation, the one into which everything goes to disappear, but from which nothing comes out. Ultimately, substance designates an entity that intervenes in an efficient way in the world and manifests itself fully in its action. But it is presupposed, indeterminate, and acts only formally on an accidental exteriority. As such, substantiality, in the strict sense, cannot be the last word in the doctrine of essence. There's a paradox here. While substance is in some way the banner of objectivity, it is far from the conclusive position of the doctrine of essence. So Hegel's attitude towards it is clearly marked by ambivalence, as is what very much said already. How then? And it is the end of my second part. How time do I have now?
2 or 3 more minutes, but maybe we can prolong the discussion into the break. This is our first talk today. Maybe a little bit, 5 or 10 minutes.
So I must go to the conclusion?
Yes, please. Yes.
It is very difficult for me, but no, it's not a problem. It's not a problem. I would like simply to consider a little bit Hegel's conception of substance with the Aristotle's one and Kantian one, and at least with the Spinozist one. Not a problem. I go to the conclusion. I would say that the critical analysis of substance shows that Hegelianism is part of the Copernican revolution, as it highlights the subordination of the thing to the self. And it is, of course, the passage from substance to subject. More precisely, Hegelian doctrine inherits Fichte's opposition between dogmatism and critical idealism. Fichte, as we know, denounces dogmatism, which explains experience on the basis of the not ego, and turns it into a thing and identifies this, and Fichte identified this dogmatic realism with Spinozism. For Fichte, then, substantialism is the adversary par excellence. The same theme is found, in my view, in Hegel's assertion that the absolute is not only a substance, but also a subject. For Hegel, only the subject is truly grounded, and this is because it is self-founded, because it is not conditioned by its other, but rather operates its Aufhebung in the sense of an uniting integration. Beyond this precise point, Hegel's work is a kind of equation of substantialism and modern metaphysics. In his lessons on the history of philosophy, as we know, Hegel defines metaphysics as the tendency toward substance, so that the fight or the debate against substance is largely conflated with the debate against dogmatic metaphysics. However, while Hegel takes up, I would say, Kant's struggle against the old metaphysics, his position is highly original. For him, it is not a question of unilaterally repudiating substantialist thought, but of criticizing it and recognizing its indispensable role in the advent of concrete subjectivity. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your talk. So maybe we have time for 1 or 2 questions. Anyone? Yes, please. Thank you. Where's the microphone?
Speak slowly.
Slowly.
Exactly.
Okay. Good. Thank you very much. Je vais essayer, mais on va pas comprendre ce que je dis. Okay. Thank you very much. I particularly appreciated the distinction between substance and causality and reciprocal causality, and your reference to Kant, who hasn't had much say in this seminar on this Congress. What I wanted to ask, though, is something a little bit different, and that is what role you think the concept of substance plays later in the Realphilosophie. And in particular, I'm thinking of the Rechtsphilosophie and ethical substance, because it seems that substance is not just a concept in the logic that we have to move through, but it actually plays a significant role later. And I wondered if you could comment very briefly on that.
Yes, yes. So very briefly, I would answer that there are substantial moments in the real philosophy, and then the substantiality implies a shortcoming, an abstraction, and when I would say that when a moment, when the notion of substance appear in the real philosophy, it has first we must admit that it has a critical meaning, and it is very clear in the analysis of the Oriental spirit, for example, and something more interesting and perhaps discutable, the state is regularly characterized as a substance. It is understandable in the sense that the state has a power, but when it is characterized as a power, I would say that it means that state cannot be, in Hegel's view, the end of the processes, because yes, I would say so. It means that the state exerts a constraint on the individual.
Okay, thank you. We have 5 minutes for 2 more questions. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And you can also speak slowly.
Thank you, Gilles, for your nice presentation. I also like that you try to interpret Hegel as a kind of synthesis of Kant and Spinoza, subject and substance. My question is this. In your explanation of the substance, you focused very much on its position in the logic of essence. But as Stephen also pointed out, apparently the concept of substance is very important also in other parts of the system. So my question would be, could you maybe outline, so to say, the place of the concept of substance in the logic of essence against the background of the task of the whole logic? So, I mean, we start with the logic of being. We start with the logic of being. We get a very external relationship, establishing determinacy, but in a very type of external relationship, which is, so to say, continuously being made more intrinsic, until at the end there is, so to say, a concept of full intrinsicity, so to say, substance, which is immediate, as it has to be determined. And then, so to say, the other determinations start.
Sorry, I do not understand. You think that substance appears
no,
in other parts of the logic?
No, I was now starting to answer my own question. I will just reformulate my question to you. And can you outline the relevance of the concept of substance against the background of the task of the science of logic, which has 3 parts: the logic of being, the logic of essence, and the logic of the concept? That's my question. I will not answer it myself. Thank you.
I would say that in a certain sense, substance is the epitome of the logic of essence. In a certain sense, is the epitome, the epitome, in a certain sense. So, and probably the notion appears from time to time in the logic of being and logic of concept, but only marginally. I'm not sure I understand your question. Not at all, probably. Not at all.
Last question. Yes.
Gilles, that was great. I'm just sad that there was not enough time to hear all of that. But I just think that you highlighted in a very great sense the problem of Hegel with Spinoza, and it just brought with up a question for me. You just said substance is related to its accidents, but not its modes. And I think it's exactly this, because here you just said Spinoza's substance is too starr, rigid for Hegel. But I just thought, can we just change, like reverse it and say maybe this substance is too fluid so that it cannot be solidified at all, so that it's such a fluid substance, Spinoza's I mean, that it cannot have accidents and it cannot just think itself, not because it's not that too starr, but just too fluid.
Substance is too fluid, according to you, in Hegel or in Spinoza?
I will just say, like, after what you said about substance and its relation to its accidents in Hegel, and then you said, for Hegel, Spinoza's substance is too starr. And I just thought that maybe, like dialectically, we could just reverse it and just say that Spinoza's substance is too fluid that it cannot be solidified at all, and that's why it cannot think itself. Not because it's too starr, but just it's so fluid that it cannot have accidents and it cannot think itself, and just we get lost in it.
So if I rightly understand, so I would say that historically, Spinoza's substance is not at all rigid, because it is, I'm not a specialist of Spinoza, but it is rather a power, a dynamic power of causation. So the reading of Hegel must be totally false, actually. But it is an heritage of Mendelssohn, for example, and of many others. I don't know if you are satisfied with this question.
Right, but we...
Okay, thank you very much.